Good morning. And I say that because it is about 9:15 a.m. in California. I'm on Pacific time. And why is that important today for me? It's important because I still haven't had my breakfast, which means I have been fasting for about 12 hours now already. I haven't eaten for 12 hours. And that is going to have a significant impact on my microbiome and my gut. And we're going to delve into that and a whole wide range of topics with Dr. Shaina Cahill today. She is an incredible asset and an incredible person to be speaking about this with because she is steeped in the world of the microbiome. She and I met at a conference last year, and immediately I had lots of questions for her, and she was phenomenal at answering my questions and was just a nice person. I just really enjoyed chatting with her, learning about her and her family. And, at these conferences, we have a lot of downtime sometimes, and it's just nice to get to know other people and vendors. So I knew I had to have her on the Delivering Health podcast because her approach, her knowledge, her perspective is something that I haven't heard before. Her ability to integrate the various aspects of the basic sciences with the clinical practice, with product development, because she is with a company, Biome Basics.
Novel biome.
Novel Biome. All right, hold on. Let me just mark the time here. Novel Biome out of Canada. And we're going to be talking today about the gut microbiome. And I'm going to be talking about my own personal health issues that I've been having as well. I had some labs done and I just reviewed some of those results with her. And I think it's going to be helpful for everybody. So, Shaina, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
When people hear about the gut microbiome, it's very popular now. It is something that I think probably everybody knows about, at least in theory. But tell me a little bit about what you think people don't understand about the microbiome.
Yeah, I think it's twofold. One, your microbiome is very similar to kind of like your brain and how it develops. So there's a lot of important stuff that happens really early on in development, and it ages just like everything else. And so supporting the gut microbiome throughout your life is so important. And as I always say, it's gotten like the science got sexy in the gut microbiome and everybody's talking about it. The part that they're missing is the amazing part of this is it's so flexible in its ability to change. And while doing lots of negative things in your life can negatively impact it, it's one part of your health that you're an active participant in. You can actively change it with the choices you make. And its impacts on health are so wide reaching. And I honestly believe at least once a month I learn something completely new about this. And as a person who is truly steeped in it, it's what I do all day long. It's amazing to me that when I got into this field, I'm a neuroscientist by trade. And so I got into it through the gut brain connection and how our gut and our brain connect. And that was very cool. And last week, I was reading a paper about how the gut and the lungs are connected. 70% of your immune system comes through your gut. And so, what we're learning is it's a driving force in health that you can impact. And that's so crazy because it's hard. Some of the things we change are kind of abstractly involved in like heart health and things like this. But by what you change, you can actively impact your gut health. And through that, then impact your overall health, which I think is there's so much power in that and the ability to take control of your health and really dictate it.
So let's set the table for everybody because I think when people hear gut microbiome, they think of the intestines,
Yes.
but the gut microbiome is much more than that, and our digestive system is much more than that. So to sort of take us from the top to the bottom of how these things are interconnected and what truly how people should think about the gut microbiome in order to begin to conceptualize maybe things that they can control and things that they can do to improve that health.
Yeah, I think the main parts of the gut microbiome are going to be the colon and the small intestine. So the intestines, that's where most of the bacteria is living and the fungi and the pathogenic the pathogens that are part of it that kind of play a role. So that's where most of them live. The beauty of this is we are one microbiome. We have a skin microbiome. We have an oral microbiome. There's microbiomes in your ears. They're everywhere. And so, from a gut microbiome standpoint, your oral microbiome is also really important and something that I've been really lucky to have really great discussions recently on is the impact of that oral microbiome, how we take care of it, what kind of toothpaste we use, if we're flossing, if all of that impacts what's going down through into the gut microbiome. And so there's a really nice tie between those two. As well, the gut microbiome is going to influence the stomach. And so, what types of acids are able to live there? What kind of permeability? What kind of mobility is happening in the gut? In the stomach as well as going into the gut. So, it's kind of one unit from kind of mouth until exit. Um, all working together. And so the oral microbiome in theory is separate, but we do know they kind of have a lot of crosstalk. And then the stomach and then the intestines play a really big role in terms of maintaining the bacterial and the microbiota, but as well in what we're feeding it and how it's kind of pulling that apart. And so I think the most obvious thing when you're thinking of the gut is what you eat. And the impacts that has. But as well, like how you sleep, what kind of stress, your exercise, all of these impact the health of those microbiota. And I always say there's things you can definitely change and things you can't. I always hate when you go to a doctor and they go, you should be less stressed. Um, and you don't really have a ton of control over how stressed you are, but you do have control over factors that lead to stress. And so I say like food is the driver. Exercise is a really big helper, and you're more likely to get more out of exercise and feel better about exercising if you're eating well. And then if you're eating and exercising, you'll see a shift in your sleep happen. And so all of these things are interconnected, and all of them is partly generally your health, but your gut microbiome becoming healthier, less leaky, and therefore you're more motivated and getting more benefits out of all of the other healthy things you're doing.
There's, trillions of bacteria in our microbiome, in our gut microbiome, as well as, on our skin and everywhere else in our body. There's even a microbiome they discovered in the liver. And you just mentioned the lungs. In terms of our digestive system and how healthy that is, it's kind of, for me, it's like anything else in our bodies. Like if I don't have to think about it, it's great. And where people start to really, I think, be concerned is when symptoms like gas and bloating or acid reflux or constipation, discomfort sets in. And so I want to dive in and use this opportunity because I'm talking to an expert to share with the listeners or people watching this, some of the lab results that I've just gotten so that they can understand how maybe some of their symptoms are connected to the intestinal health. So I'd been experiencing acid reflux and bloating, belching, gas, and I'm going to be very, very transparent on this. That's what happens to humans when their gut microbiome is not working right. And
Mhm.
I could have done what a lot of people do, and that is, well, I'm just going to go take a probiotic. I'm going to go try and take a pill. But I knew it's a lot more complicated than that. And so what I did is I took a stool test that looked at the microbiome, different bacteria that are there, infections, an infection in the stomach, H. pylori. I had that present. Looked at some digestive enzymes like elastase 1, which is secreted by the pancreas that goes into the intestines and helps to digest proteins. And I looked at different if there was fat in my stool, fat maldigestion, which I did not have. But let's talk about in terms of those results. I had low Akkermansia, and there's speculation, given my age, 58 years old, as we get older, that there's less acid being produced in the stomach, and that's a increase the risk of that as we get older. So, given what we talked about, given what you just heard, I'd love for you to, if you're comfortable with it, sort of summarize this clinical picture of how these things might be related from the stand, really starting at from the moment I put food in my mouth and I'm chewing, what's going on in the system, what's out of balance, what's working properly all the way down, and in that way, if that's something that you're comfortable with.
Yeah, I think when we're thinking about the gut microbiome, it's funny that symptoms tend to come much longer after the dysbiosis starts. And so most of the symptoms are caused by basically the composition and the kind of diversity within the gut changing. And it's not always, we always hear, we read about this a lot, sometimes the diversity looks okay, but it's not, there's not enough of the different composites of the different types of microbiota. And so what happens is a lot of times in some of the symptoms that we talked about are very SIBO-like, which is a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And for a very long time, we thought, well, the gut microbiome, the lower, what we consider the full gut microbiome, used to be very just colonic. And we're learning there's a balance between the small and the large intestine. And this is all basically, if you work going backwards, if you get dysbiosis in the colon, which is where most of the bacteria are, that can lead into dysbiosis within the small intestine.
Meaning it can
And then
migrate
both of
up. The bacteria can migrate, they can move around.
yeah, and it's more that the wrong bacteria get there, or you get less of it, so that it's not able to hold its population within, because the small and the large intestine are kind of blocked between each other with like a valve. You can think of it that way. And so bacteria going the wrong way because the types of bacteria in the colon are wrong and they're growing the wrong way, or you're not able to hold the right amounts of bacteria in the small intestine, and that's causing a dysbiosis between the two.
And
And
just
that then
just
will impact the stomach as well.
yeah, just so people understand there's always this little chemical warfare going on in our intestines with the microbiome where you have bacteria, good healthy bacteria that are keeping the bad bacteria in check. There's always some of that there, but then the good healthy bacteria are able to overpower and dominate and keep the numbers of the pathogenic or bad bacteria low, so it's not doesn't affect us. But when it gets out of balance and the symptom producing bacteria can multiply and grow, then what also happens then is it can they can migrate and they can move into another part of the intestine, like the small intestine, where it shouldn't be. And with
And
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, with healthy bacteria, when you have the right amount, the ability to offset or not allow overgrowth of these bad bacteria, you sit in a happier state. The problem is when the good bacteria get to a lower level, pathogenic bacteria, their goal is to overpower. And so as soon as there's a hole, I always say, as soon as there's an empty seat, that seat will be filled by a pathogenic bacteria. And then it's harder for the good bacteria to overpower. And pathogenic bacteria grows faster, quicker. And what they're fed by often is foods that we tend to crave when we're getting towards an unstable. So sugars, processed foods, those kinds of things feed bacteria we don't want a lot of. Or feed the wrong type of fungi and those kinds of things. And so you get this overgrowth. They overpower the good, and it's very hard to bring them back once you have none of them. And so, in your case too, you have to think about is the gut is shifting as we get older, and so we just have less balance in the bacteria, so the diversity goes down. Your competition composition is shifting, and how we process food is also changing. So we become less effective at taking food apart and getting more out of it as we get older. And we all think of older as like, 40s, 50s, but if we look at terms of other organs aging, like we know the brain starts to age 25, 30. So your brain becomes less plastic and things. So we had to reshift what we define as age. And so like what you eat, you get less out of. So you've got to choose better foods. How long it takes us to process food changes and what bacteria is there. And so you get less good bacteria. So you're more susceptible to overgrowth of pathogenic bacteria, but as well, keeping those good bacteria healthy becomes more important because getting them back gets harder.
When you look at, so I want to go back to sort of the top down approach, because
Yeah.
one of the things in the analysis, and for full disclosure, I'm not an expert in this stuff, so I used Gemini Pro with the Google AI platform. I put my labs in there, I gave it a prompt, basically summarized the case as at the physician level summary of the case, and it gave me, and you looked at it, what we both thought was a phenomenal analysis, and
Yeah.
really broke things down, even in terms of an approach to try and heal and restore things. And a couple of things surprised me what I read. Now, I did mention the low stomach acid before, and I was aware of that. That might be an issue just because of my age, and also because of the H. pylori. But stomach acid, in terms of sterilizing food, when you don't have enough stomach acid, that can start this whole downstream cycle of dysbiosis. So if that's an issue, correcting that through supplementation, which can be done, or supplementing with it longer term, and digestive enzymes is one way to start rebalancing the microbiome, as well as, of course, changing your diet. But what was fascinating to me was when it talked about the what is it was called major migrating motor complex.
Yeah.
Now that's something I've listened to a lot of podcasts on microbiome, and I've been to talks, and that's something that I don't think I've ever heard before discussed when it comes to dysbiosis and gut health. So could you talk people through that a little bit? And if you don't remember the details, I'm happy to share with you and the audience, but of what impact that may be having on me and other people, and how that
Yeah.
can be restored.
Yeah, I think if we want to stick with the kind of looking at what you're seeing, the issue with this mobility is tied really to the SIBO issue.
So first of all, we need to define what the migrating motor complex is. I don't think people.
Yeah, so it's the simplest format is the ability of the intestines to move food and items through at the right pace. So, if you were to ever look into, how we decide if you buy encapsulated capsules or slow release capsules, all of these things are timed on how much acid's in your stomach, how long it takes to break down there. And then the intestine has a higher acidic level than the stomach. And so things break down very quickly in the intestines. So all of that, all of this timing on slow release and drugs is based on how quickly things are going to move through the stomach and through the intestines. So these are the complexes. They're kind of pushing things through. So we have this timed down very well. The problem is a mixture of the acids changing, so how kind of broken down everything is, as well as the bacteria that's kind of dictating the health of both the small and large intestine. When those break down, things actually move slowly through there. And partly why we think there's an overgrowth of some of these bacteria is if things are sitting in the wrong places for too long, feeding the wrong types of bacteria or allowing crosstalk between kind of that valve we were talking about, the small and large intestine, because everything's not moving through at the pace that it's supposed to. And we talk about this a lot in science. Like our bodies love being homeostatic. They love being at baseline. We have a specific pH everywhere. Everything moves at a certain time. You breathe so often, your lung, everything does everything perfectly. As soon as something moves too slow or doesn't move effectively, and so not everything is moving together because everything's not contracting and releasing at the right times. Things are sitting in the wrong places. That causes overgrowth, that causes crosstalk, things going backwards when they're supposed to be going forwards. And so when all of these start to happen is how you're processing food and what you're getting out of it changes because it's not going to the right areas at the right rate, as well as it causes overgrowth in places it's not supposed to because bacteria is being fed in the wrong places. So where something's supposed to only sit for a minute and it's really supposed to be processed 2 minutes down the road, now it's starting to be processed in the wrong spot, not as effectively, and then it's overfeeding things and allowing things to grow that aren't supposed to be there because everything's slow. It's like being in traffic versus being able to drive from point A to point B without traffic and how you feel about being in traffic versus not. Think about that as your gut having something where it's not supposed to be and not able to get it where it's supposed to be going effectively.
And so when you're looking at downstream, one of the things that was out of balance for me was low elastase 1 and low Akkermansia, that specific bacteria. So could you talk a little bit about each of those and how why those are important markers and what somebody can do about them? And because I think that it's an example of sort of an overall approach of gut
Yeah.
restoration.
Yeah, the elastin one, I don't know as much about. I'll open up with that. Mostly because it's coming in from outside, and I tend to study on the inside a little bit more. But I think there is important. Similarly, you talked about you don't have fats presence, but overabundance of fats in the stool. Both of those are indicating that organs outside of the gut that play a role in supporting it aren't aren't cross-talking or aren't talking effectively with the intestine. And we had to remember that we think about the gut microbiome as a separate organ a lot, but it really is part of a system, not just for digestion, but in connection with the liver as well. So that's an indication that either the signaling from the gut that it needs something from other organs isn't happening at the rate that it's supposed to, or there's some kind of mistalk between those two. Um, Akkermansia is a kind of a twofold. So we know that has a role in supportive aging. So people with more of that as they get older tend to age better and have a healthier microbiome long term. And it's one of the bacteria that's seen in centurions or the people that live to 100. They tend to have higher levels of this. Another thing is it plays a big role in gut protection or gut lining protection as well. It's a good indicator that it may not be an indicator of leaky gut, but it may be an indicator of the beginning kind of the integrity of the gut being shifted. And so one of the biggest hallmarks of disease and inflammation often is that the gut lining has become leaky. And so the body is reacting to things outside of the gut that should be contained within. And that can trigger both immune responses and inflammatory responses. So that would be a good indicator that there's some kind of early signs of kind of the gut lining maybe being impacted and tight junctions maybe becoming looser. And that also would tie back into the mobility within the gut because, again, if that's not moving and that's causing an overgrowth and inflammation within the gut, that can actually impact the tight junctions as well.
So there are companies out there that sell Akkermansia probiotics, as a
Yeah.
dietary supplement. Is that a good strategy? Can I just take those capsules and repopulate my Akkermansia and fix everything?
Go about the day. No, and this is a probiotic issue in general. Probiotics are transient in the gut. So while you take them and while they're present within the gut, they have impacts, and we know that that's well studied. The problem is they don't engraft in the gut or they don't take home within the gut. And so as soon as you stop taking them, they leave. And so they can often have impacts either short or long term, depending on the dosing you're taking and how long. But as soon as you stop feeding in those kind of selected bacteria, they're gone. And so in some cases, if you have a healthy gut with maybe you have a small shift or at the beginnings of some issues, taking antibiotic, sorry, taking or take after taking an antibiotic, um, taking some probiotics after, what can help there is it kind of creates a bridge from the beginning of dysbiotic into allowing the gut to restore itself and get healthy. So the gut microbiome again has the ability to shift. So you feed it better, you allow it to restore itself, and it often can bounce back fairly well. And so what probiotics can do is kind of help reduce the symptoms or allow the gut kind of time to restore with some support. The downside is that if you don't have anything to build from, if there isn't some of it in the system that you can allow to rebuild, taking a probiotic doesn't have anything to support. And so you don't get any kind of recovery period. And so we think about the gut in different phases of like just lifestyle changes would restore the issue. Or in some cases, it may take some really dictated supplements with like a naturopath or natural course of trying to figure out what can I do to bring it back to a point where it's able to restore itself. And in some cases, the good bacteria is gone and there's not enough to allow the gut to naturally rebuild on its own. And that's where you get into needing to kind of fully restore the microbiome using something like fecal microbiota transplantation or FMT, which is taking a healthy gut from someone else, and then purifying that down so it's just the microbiota and then allowing that. And because that's born naturally from another gut and it's the right types and styles of bacteria, it's actually able to engraft. And then that then builds up on its own to be its own healthy gut. And interesting because you don't get a direct copy. Your body always plays a role. So even if you take someone else's healthy microbiome and put it in somebody, you get a shifted profile to that person. It'll look a lot like the donor, but it will be different because your body still plays a role in it, and what was already there will play a role. And so you kind of have different stages of where the gut is. But like things like supplements and probiotics, what they're doing is supporting the gut to allow itself to restore. It's not giving the instructions or it's not replacing the bacteria. It's just allowing a bridging point so that the gut can kind of heal underneath it. But if you're missing something completely, there's nothing to rebuild back from.
If so, I want to dive into the FMT bit in a moment, but first, let's say somebody does have some bacteria, some healthy bacteria still there.
Hmm.
A probiotic is not a long-term solution. A probiotic doesn't seed the gut, doesn't itself repopulate the gut, is what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah.
So, what can people do then? What will help the healthy bacteria um, increase the number of those to help keep the pathogenic bacteria at bay? What can people do then to modulate their microbiome and fix it?
Yeah, the biggest thing is diet. Um, Diet has a larger impact on the composition of the gut than your genetics does. And diet makes changes quickly. So within 24 to 48 hours, you'll see the gut start to shift based on the food that you're eating. The biggest thing to do to build a healthy, diverse gut microbiome is to eat diversely. So, eating lots of different types of whole foods, lots of different types of fibers, lots of different types of both animal and plant-based proteins, like some types of proteins, fibers. Um, Fiber is the kind of the biggest, most important part of diet when it comes to the gut microbiome, because it plays a role in short chain fatty acids, which are huge in the gut. And from a brain perspective, they really help with making neurotransmitters in the gut. But they are one of the bigger building blocks of everything the gut is building. So all of these bacteria and these fungi and everything live in the gut to help synthesize everything else you need out of your food. And so if you don't have the right guys there, you're not using what you're putting in correctly. You're not building the right vitamins. You're not building the neurotransmitters you need. You're not supporting the immune function through the gut. And so you really do have to eat across because the gut is doing so much. And so when we say eat diversely, we mean like actively think about how many different types of foods you're eating. And if you're having, a lot of people do, they don't tolerate fiber very well because they don't eat it regularly. So then you can start with, fermented foods and build yourself back up into whole fibers. And then eating prebiotic foods, so foods that kind of support the gut from the beginning. They are the whole building blocks to allow those bacteria to come back. And so I am a gamifier. I like to gamify my life because that's what motivates me. Like I like being the best version of myself. So I'm always trying to be like, what's my next goal to get to? And so with food, one of the things we've tried to do in terms of gamifying it is like try to build up to next week, eat 10 different foods that week and be that two different types of, lettuces, two different types of peppers, like a new whole grain that you haven't eaten before, building up the types of food you're eating and then keep doing that. And so we say on average, someone should be eating about 50 different foods a week. That sounds like a lot, but you could put 12 in a smoothie. So just thinking about how diverse it is, and the more diverse you eat, the more diverse the bacteria in your gut has to be to process that food. And so if you have a healthy gut, you have to feed across the foods so that those bacteria can live. They need food for energy, as well as synthesizing all of those vitamins and those neurotransmitters. And food can make you happy, and it really does because serotonin, which is one of our happy chemicals in our brain, most of it's made in your gut. And so what you eat really does impact your mood, impacts fatigue and brain fog. All of those things are really driven by the gut. As well as like if you feel sluggish, eating food associated with feeling sluggish will continue to feed into that. So these processed high fat foods, so eating these, rich, healthy, diverse, colorful foods, I always like to eat for color. Again, because I like to create whimsy in my life. But these types of things, they make you feel better, and then you have the energy and space to do the next best thing that will make you feel even better on top of that.
I love that approach. I mean, it just, this hopefully can be fun and enjoyable for
Yeah.
people in their lives, and exciting. The what about sleep and stress?
Stress is the antithesis of poor health, really, in the end of the day, because when your body is stressed, it doesn't do anything effectively. Stress affects your digestion. How quickly you digest food is impacted by how stressed you are, because your body only has so much resource. And depending on what systems you have turned on, it will turn down or lower how much energy goes to another system, because this one's asking for 80% of our power. So we've got 20% to spread everywhere else. And so, the same thing with immune and inflammation. Like if your body's internally fighting an immune thing and you meet someone with a cold, you're more likely to get that cold because your immune system is focused on something that's happening internally. You become more at risk. Stress is the same way. Your digestion's impacted, sleep is impacted. Um, I mean, breathing is impacted by being really stressed. Like every system gets dysregulated. Unfortunately, being told to not be stressed is literally nothing, except in some cases make you more stressed. So part of this is like food plays a role in how stressed you are. If you feed your body, it has more energy to use, and it's turning down some of the inflammatory pathways and stuff from not eating healthy foods. Exercise plays a big role in stress and sleep. But funny enough, if you've ever read about exercise, it's all brain based. Everyone's like, it's so good for your brain. It makes, but it's very good for your gut microbiome as well. Again, will impact how you process food, how quickly. And the other part of this is sleep. And so these three, food, exercise, and sleep will help with stress. I truly don't believe there's anything that you can tell someone to do to make them less stressed. It's all about lifestyle changes around that support your body's ability to process stress more effectively, because stress exists in our world. Sleep, the big one for sleep, and we know this from shift work as well as people that live in, even when you're traveling and you're traveling over a time break, sleeping when it is dark outside and being awake when it is light outside is the best form of sleep you can get. Just doing that one change, your sleep will get better, and the benefits you get from sleep will be better. We know people on shift work are much more likely to have chronic diseases, as well as they have high levels of stress that they're unable to kind of process. We know that your gut microbiome will shift from disruption in sleep just from traveling. So it's one of the things you say when you're traveling. Think about the foods you're eating, but as well as supporting your gut health while you're traveling to different time zones, because that can impact it that quickly. And then all of these things together create a healthy space to maintain your gut health, but your overall health, and then your body has the right types of energies to then mount better immune responses, deal with stress more effectively, support your brain health because it's got the building blocks and everything you're doing right, that all of the other stuff that's coming at you, your body's able to deal with more effectively.
It's all interconnected.
We're
Let's,
one big unit that at some point in science and healthcare, we decided to make us all these sub parts, but
yes.
we really are just one person with, we're a bunch of mushy organs and bloods floating around. And somehow we thought everything was separate, and we really have started treating everything as units, but they're all together in one person. And so I think we're moving back towards this idea of holistic health or whole person health. And it really is true when you look at making these choices that are full health impacts. We know exercise does great things everywhere, but it has huge impacts on gut health, which then supports brain health. And so as exercise is coming at you from a bunch of places, and maybe it's all driven by the gut. Some days I feel that, some days I don't. It depends on my mood and what I've read. But it's supporting gut health, which has such a big role in so many subunits of your body, your heart, your liver, your lungs, your brain. All of these are impacted by exercise on its own, but as well through the gut.
Let's transition now and touch briefly on what I think you spend much of your time with, and that is fecal microbial transplant, or FMT. You mentioned it briefly before. You mentioned what it was. That is, I'm curious to know where clinically do you think, or does the research show the most benefits are found? I mean, is this somebody who just wants to age healthy and has no symptoms, or are we talking about somebody with ulcerative colitis? I mean, where does this come into play where people should consider this as a potential option for themselves?
Yeah. I want to say everywhere, and only because that truly is how it feels some days. Um, the breadth at which targeting the gut improves health, disease, and treatment response grows every day. In supportive care, we look at using fecal microbiota transplant in pairing with oncology treatments. So there's, both a lot of cancer-based treatments really destroy the gut. And so what does post-cancer life look like with a dysbiotic gut? And can we fix that by restoring the gut? In immune-based medications for cancers, having a healthier gut makes you more responsive to that treatment. So, like in a cancer space, now we're seeing a big movement in can we restore the gut or support the gut and get better outcomes and reduce the likelihood of recurrence of cancer. You look at GI conditions, small bacterial overgrowth or SIBO, IBS, ulcerative colitis. There's a lot of research there, and we're seeing a build and using FMT to help restore this because a lot of people with IBS that have had it chronically or ulcerative colitis and have had this disease chronically over a long period of time, there's no building blocks left in the gut to kind of naturally rebuild to get rid of that disease. So it becomes this idea of like early on, can you make lifestyle changes to improve it? And then you get into a chronic state where you really do have to start again. Your whole gut needs new instructions because everything you're doing still default to that kind of chronic state. And then neurologically, we're seeing a blow up of the use of FMT in a research setting and in human clinical trials for multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's disease is one of the newer areas. We're also seeing some research kind of building out in ALS. And the idea here is inflammation plays a huge role in all of these diseases. The immune system plays a role in all of these diseases, and those are dysregulated. And to kind of go a little off topic, but bring you back into why this is so important, Parkinson's disease, and this is one of the reasons I work in this field, from a brain coming in from the brain, Parkinson's disease, 80% of Parkinson's patients, somewhere between 10 to 20 years before they show Parkinson's symptoms, 80% of them all have the same GI colonic concerns.
Wow.
So that's
Wow.
10, say 10 years before you are diagnosed with Parkinson's.
Mhm.
80% of those people are showing the same GI issues. And
Wow.
so we start looking at more diseases this way. So in MS, there is a completely different gut profile in patients with MS than a healthy comparative person. And part of MS is very autoimmune and it plays a big role, but we think of it in terms of like brain dyssignaling and muscle and movement. So connecting back to that gut, the gut can be difficult there, but we know the gut plays a role in it. And we see it in clinical setting where patients are getting FMT and not only is their symptoms slowing, but a lot of them are recovering a lot of these symptoms. And these are motor-based symptoms. And then you see this in Alzheimer's disease. You see these in neurodevelopmental conditions like autism spectrum disorder and ADHD. We're seeing research there in the gut not developing properly. So getting dyssignaling or being too immature, so it's not sending the right signals to the immune system and to the brain. And then you see a dysregulation in development profiles. And so does restoring the gut there then help with that? And the early research says yes. And so this idea is that the gut plays such a big role in brain development and the immune system development, and disease often is tied back to inflammation in the immune system. How many other diseases are playing a role here? And my favorite part of this is this where we look at prevention. Do we look at how the gut is changing and go, hey, you've got so many red flags in your gut, we think we either have to start supporting it or we need to reset it using something like FMT to protect you because you're going down this way of these types of diseases that look likely. As well as pairing it with other kind of, we're seeing a pairing with some other experimental things like stem cells And restoring the gut before doing stem cells makes stem cells more effective. And you talked about longevity. We're seeing it there, and we're seeing a lot more people in the kind of biohacking space talking about this, being like, is the gut the thing we're not targeting correctly, or do we need to be resetting our gut as we before we go into kind of doing all of these other things so they're going to be more impactful because we're going to
Yeah.
process them and use them better.
Wow. Amazing. The potential applications are incredible. What
Yeah.
is that done? How is that done? How is a FMT administered?
Yeah. So traditionally, it started with uh, being applied during colonoscopy. Then we moved into enemas, and in about 2019, the use of oral FMT became big. And this A was kind of driven by the need to expand how long the treatment was happening. Single dose treatments are great for acute cases, but in more chronic diseases, restoring the gut and changing the lifestyle around supporting a healthy gut required longer treatment. And so now we're seeing these oral capsules, and us at Novel Biome, we have a product that's a oral powder, which is purified down, can be mixed with water and drank, which sounds um, far-fetched, really, when you're thinking about this microbiomes being encapsulated from stool. So it's processed down and purified, similarly with the oral capsules. And what this allows for is longer dosing and then allowing for people to be able to kind of target these more chronic conditions and doing multiple doses because colonoscopy has its own risks as well as it's not an overly pleasant experience to have multiples done.
Yeah.
And we know enema is not as effective. And so we've moved into, so 2019 was kind of the launch of the capsules. And so these are double coated so they kind of can live throughout the stomach acid and most of the small intestine. And then you get, then it releases towards mid, late small intestine and kind of allows for reseeding throughout the whole gut, which is why colonoscopy was kind of used originally because you can kind of seed through more of the large intestine.
Now, going back to taking a probiotic, we're doing this
Mhm.
orally.
Yeah.
Previously, we talked about how a probiotic, taking those isolated strains of bacteria in capsules doesn't reseed.
Yeah.
But if I'm doing a fecal microbial transplant orally,
Hmm.
and what I understand from that is you're taking stool, and essentially what somebody is getting from that are the bacteria.
Hmm.
How is that different from then just taking a probiotic? How
Yeah.
does that enable? How can that reseed, but a probiotic doesn't?
Yeah. I think part of it is that it's an exact match, like it's supposed to be there. Probiotics are not made in the same environment of the exact same strength, so they're not a perfect match. Was one of the reasons they don't. As well as with fecal microbiota transplant, what's happening is while we're purifying from stool, we're encapsulating the entire microbiome, and so it's not just the bacteria. So I think part of what plays a role here is ensuring engraftment is A, that it's an exact match, but B, that all of the supportive bits that allow those bacteria to engraft and stay healthy are also encapsulated there. And so it's more about the puzzle pieces fitting as well as there being, all the metabolites and the other microbiotics. It's not just bacteria that live in the gut that are important there. The fungi, the viruses, all of those are part of this interplay. And so you get all of that at one shot. And so I think that's why it makes it tends to stick, I guess would be the word I'd use.
And I imagine there'd be a range of times of how long somebody would need to duration, how long somebody would need to take it for reseeding to occur. But what is in general, is this something that somebody has to be taking forever, or then they take it for a while and it helps restore their gut and then they're done?
Yeah. So it's a outside of there's a couple of conditions that have kind of inflammation pathways. So like ulcerative colitis, you have flares. So that's kind of it's in its own subtype. You kind of have to monitor to ensure that there's no support or that the flare isn't still going to come in. We have to kind of help the gut through. But on average, the way that it's done, acute issues, something like C. diff infections, or like post antibiotic recovery would be short, a couple of days, and you're good to go. You're basically just something pathogenic happens or the population has been kind of killed out very quickly. And you're just doing kind of supporting or replacing and reseeding. chronic conditions require longer treatments, but the way that it's normally done is like bolus treatments. We call this is like 2 days of a lot of FMT. And this kind of does the initial seeding. And then we consider the rest is maintenance. And that's kind of daily dosing for, a month to 3 months, depending on the condition and how chronic it is. And that partly is to pair with making the lifestyle changes. And so, a lot of times, if you've had a chronic condition, everything about your life revolves around that condition. What you eat, when you sleep, what kind of exercise you do, everything has shifted to kind of maintain the best quality of life you can with this chronic condition. As you heal the condition, you have to undo some of that learning. So you have to eat differently so you keep the bacteria healthy, and you have to move more, and you have to do those. And part of this, what we're seeing is maintenance phases reflect how much lifestyle changes need to happen so that the gut can maintain the new health you've put in. And so part of this kind of maintenance is just supplementing, ensuring that the bacteria is there and healthy and good, and then allows all of the other changes to happen around it so that the gut doesn't die off during that lifestyle shift. And then you kind of aren't better ahead than you were because it took 2 months for you to kind of alter your diet, right? So we see this change in like um, allowing for longer treatment, allowing for all the other shifts that need to happen, allowing as the inflammation goes down and the immune system re-regulates, what your gut's going to need will also change. And so we want to support all of that shifting. And then after that, as long as you continue with that healthier lifestyle, we don't see people needing to re-up this. We do say if you do this in your 20s or your 30s, you may want to do a top up in your 60s, just because as your gut kind of shifts anyways, like maybe it's worthwhile checking and seeing, is my gut still healthy, or am I showing, indications that it's aging? And it would be worthwhile because you may just have a more propensity to go back to that other kind of chronic state.
This has been amazing. I mean, I could keep talking to you for another hour, I'm sure. But how can people find more about your work and learn more about what you all are doing?
Yeah. So we work directly with clinicians, hospitals, researchers. That's where we're a contract manufacturer of FMT. So that's where we sell. We do try to help educate patients because, as a patient, you are your best advocate. You really understand what's happening within your body. So understanding where the gut plays a role is really key. So if you go to our website, novel, Novel, biome, biome.com, we have tons of blogs there that are written for patients to read. What do we know about the gut in IBS? What do we know about the gut in Alzheimer's disease? And part of this is it allows you to understand the gut. What do we know anything about FMT? Not everywhere do we know, and so that's part of the transparency of the education. If you look us up on like on YouTube or on Instagram or wherever things happen on the internet, I'm like the worst internet person, so I apologize. But that's part of what we do. All of our online education is geared towards patients wanting to understand how to make their gut healthier, what makes the biggest impacts, what kind of food. We literally have posts on like, you're traveling. Here's some things you should think about while you're traveling in terms of your gut. And then we have a podcast slash our YouTube where it's myself and our founder, who's a naturopath. So it's the clinical and the research side together. And we literally just nerd out for like 30 minutes about whatever topic either someone's asked us about or we just think would be cool to talk about. And the next episode coming out is literally a 30-minute discussion on diet and the gut and the importance of, transparent food guides
Amazing. So
because that was the latest thing we Googled. And so it's part of this is wanting to support patients. And then we have lots of resources for doctors. We'll help you walk through what kind of questions you have, how to make a protocol, how do you start this, how do you, what kind of safety measures, what kind of validated measures should we be using to make sure there's success. And so we help kind of guide doctors because our whole principle is we really believe this should work. We believe people should be asking more questions about it, and we want to give it to the hands of doctors so that they can kind of push this forward and use it and have access to it. And so we will walk through the journey with you and answer all your questions as you go. So reach out if you're a patient with a question or if you're a doctor with a question. Someone on our team is always there to answer those or guide you to the right person to ask.
Amazing. And that's novelbiome.com. And then
Yeah.
that'll be linked in the show notes as well as YouTube and Instagram and your other social media channels so everybody can access what's incredible information. And you've been an incredible source of information today. Thank you for spending time with me and indulging the conversation that is in some way centered around my test results. So, as an example for other people to hopefully understand the impact of the gut and gut health can have on them, and also sharing about FMT and how important that is, that people should consider that, physicians should consider it, and patients can raise those questions with their doctors and find people who might be open to doing that with them. So, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. It's been great.